Wingman Joker, thank you for listening to this channel and please support the channel. Please subscribe. Chapter 04, Returned. The sun was high in the sky when Adrian abruptly shook and then opened his eyes. Strange thoughts were filling his mind, forcing him to sit up abruptly and nearly fall off his seat as he began to look around fanatically to identify his surroundings. He was at a desk at the back of a normal classroom full of students. In front of them, a pretty teacher was writing on a whiteboard and explaining some stupid magic theory stuff that most of the students didn't care about. Their eyes were on her long slender legs and the professional black skirt that failed to cover them properly as the teacher stretched herself up to fill the board. That's why no one noticed Adrian's bizarre actions a moment earlier. Now, who can tell me the difference between a magician and a null? The teacher asked as he turned around. Lloyd, quote. What? Lloyd, who was a handsome muscular jock, asked. He was not paying attention. Magician and a null, why are they different? The teacher patiently repeated the question. A magician is someone who has magical meridians. Lloyd paused. And, the teacher asked, raising one eyebrow and then, looking around the classroom searching for another prey. Summer, and have magical circles. Summer, a tan stylish girl, who had fashionable blonde dyed hair, replied nonchalantly as Adrian inspected her, allowing the memories from this world to slowly appear in his mind. Wrong, the teacher scolded. Firstly, it is magical circuits, not circles, and the correct answer would be, to have enough control over mana. Creating circuits is a direct result of the two previous conditions, so naturally, they are defined by each individual's meridians width and mana manipulation capability. The teacher said. Now, Sophie, answer me, what % of the population can use magic? 5%. Sophie, who was the pretty class monitor, replied. Wrong, it is about 3%, the teacher corrected her. But the book, 5% of the population have the capacity to be magicians. Not magicians, the teacher explained. What's the difference? A girl from the back asked. It is the degree of magical ability. The teacher explained in an authoritative tone. The 5% ratio counts also both, those with very weak meridians, and those who can't manipulate mana for one reason or another. She explained. Oh, like Summer, the muscular guy from earlier said. Fuck you, Summer cursed directly. Better than being a fucking null. Summer, watch your language, the teacher scolded. And yes, like your friend Summer who can't form any circuits despite having both meridians and magical abilities. The teacher said, ignoring Summer's hateful glares. The cause for such anomalies is still an active field of research, but it is most likely to inherent weak control over magic. But, can't people like her just use engraved magical tools to cast spells? Sophie asked. That's correct, but that doesn't make them any different from those who just have magical meridians who take up 10% of the population. The teacher said. They can work anything from alchemists and artificers to magical warriors, but can never be full-fledged magicians. She explained. Anyway, let's continue. Adrian, whose mind slowly cleared up, ignored the rest of the lesson as he peered out of the window to the side of the classroom. He could spot a familiar long spiraling white tower in the distance between the buildings. It looked like some branch of a giant tree sticking from the ground and reaching the sky. This was the magical tower where his father was the head magician. He was back to his original world. The transfer was a success. Arg! Suddenly he felt a piercing pain as if hundreds of bullets were entering his mind all at once. With them, they brought back a myriad of memories and experiences. They were his soul fragments, returning home after a long journey. He couldn't help but bump his head into the desk in an attempt to numb the pain. Adrian, pay attention, the teacher who was startled by his actions said, but Adrian, whose head was about to explode, didn't care. He just jumped from his desk and ran out of class. Hey, the teacher yelled, but he just pushed the door shut behind him. To the nurse's office again? One classmate asked. I think he is going to puke in the toilets as usual, Lloyd replied. Hopefully he wouldn't do it in the corridors, Summer said. I don't want to step on that shit by accident. Summer, that's rude. Another girl, the class monitor Sophie, scolded her softly. I am just stating facts. I don't even know how a stupid sickly guy like him managed to enter this school in the first place. Summer replied. I am already ashamed of attending this class with nulls, let alone a fool like him, she added, insulting everyone in the class who knew that the only reason this bitch was here in this school for normal people was that no magical school would accept her. Enough, let's continue, the teacher scolded. Sophie, what's the difference between natural mana and ordered mana? She asked the class monitor. Continuing her class. A magician can only use ordered mana to create stable magical circuits. Sophie answered quickly, like the rest, forgetting everything about Adrian. Ellipsis. Adrian, whose head was about to literally explode, hurried to find a place where he wouldn't be disturbed as he assimilated his returning souls. From this body's hazy memory, he remembered the existence of an abandoned classroom on the highest floor, so he hurried there. Reaching it, he quickly hurried in and closed the door, before he collapsed to the ground. No, he must find a place where he would not be interrupted. Biting his lip to stay awake, he quickly crawled into a nearby cabinet, where he sat in a meditative pose and then closed his eyes after taking a deep breath. He reached for his mana pool, trying to activate a hiding spell. Ah! A sharp pain ran through his body, making the mana he collected scatter. Damn it, all the magical circuits he had were damaged for some reason. Still, his meridians seemed to be filled with energy, he could use those as he stimulated them, forcing the mana to enter his bloodstream. He bit his finger, making it bleed, then drew a pentagram on the floor in front of him, filling its side with strange symbols. It all took seconds to finish, as if he had done this thousands of times. Start, he uttered lastly as he touched the pentagram's center, making it shine and then vanish, causing the cabinet he was in to shimmer a little. The return to normal, well, not exactly. It became as if this piece of furniture was the least important thing in the whole world. Making sure he was safe at last, he let go of the last of his defenses. After that it was hell. The soul fragments that returned from all around the universe didn't return by themselves, but they carried with them the entire souls of the other bodies and a part of the energy that helped them escape their worlds. And all of them had the intention of taking the entire body. All of those were bombarding Adrian's body at an accelerated rate, trying to compete with each other. Thankfully, all of them belonged to the same original soul, and as the soul fragments slowly recognized that they couldn't take over all on their own, and began to reconnect to their original positions. Some parts were missing, as not all of Adrian's other selves survived or managed to make the trip back, but the extra space was taken in minutes as the excess energy the souls brought with them allowed him to fix the holes and reinforce them very easily. He even began to use some of the energy to fix and cleanse his body, which was in a very poor state for some reason. The energy that those souls brought along was enormous. He didn't know how long it took, but by the time he was done, and slowly opened his eyes to look at the magical watch on his wrist. It was about 8 p.m. He spent 6 whole hours in the merging process. Finally, feeling it was all over, he took a long breath and relaxed. He didn't plan to make a move, or in better words, he couldn't. His thoughts were still too chaotic for that, and he needed to sort them out before doing anything. He slowly tried to recall what happened to his main body after the incident. This body's memory should become the central memory if he ever wanted to not lose himself. This was the best course of action, and all the soul fragments seemed to agree. As he focused, the memories slowly began to flow. On the day of the incident when his soul scattered, the ritual he was performing seemed to have caused some grand phenomena in the sky that engulfed his entire mansion. Fearing that something was wrong, the servants broke into the lab in the basement where Adrian was conducting the ritual and found him collapsed in the center of a pentagram, bleeding from his 5 orifices. He woke up in the hospital a week later to a pair of very angry parents and family inquisitors who questioned him thoroughly about what happened. Sadly for both him and them, he had completely no memory of that. It was as if he couldn't remember anything for the last 2 years or so. But from what he figured out from their questioning, it seemed like the family found the forbidden books he hid, and launched an investigation about him. Thankfully, because of the sensitive nature of black magic, his father's quick thinking and the family not wanting a scandal in front of the public, the entire thing was wrapped up, framing it as if it was just a normal experiment going wrong. After all, there were no casualties. Adrian's punishment was not dropped though. They were going to decide on it in his assessment, which was delayed 2 months because of the incident. Everything should have been wrapped up quietly after that, but Adrian's parents quickly discovered some very disturbing facts as time passed and he began to become healthier. Not only did Adrian lose his memory, his IQ seemed to have significantly reduced after the incident, and he also seemed to have lost his power as a magician. His magical circuits were still there, including the 4th degree one, which stunned his parents who didn't know he established it. Sadly, despite his meridians and circuits being in perfect condition, he couldn't control it or use any magic at all. Every time he tried he would spasm in pain. After many tests, the doctors and experts who were dispatched to examine him determined that this was the result of him losing a large chunk of his soul. Soul loss due to the use of black magic was the final diagnosis. So knowing all that, the family's council, which was composed of several competing elders from the main and the branch families, finally got their chance to make a move and weaken the patriarch's power. Being no longer needed to be lenient with him, they decided to declare him incompetent for his first assessment. His punishment for the use of black magic was that all of his accomplishments that he did so far would be ignored. All his privileges and resources would be confiscated and taken by the family, and he would be banished from the family. Thankfully, his grandfather, the patriarch, intervened using all his power at the last moment and managed to put some conditions by paying a great price. The first one was that if Adrian were to regain his power as a magician, this punishment should be reconsidered. And the second was that the banishment shall be delayed until his second assessment to give the experts a chance to cure him. If he was cured, he would be able to remain in the family. That was the best he could do, and the council reluctantly agreed in exchange for some benefits. For some reason, they were pretty sure Adrian could never be cured. Adrian was quickly admitted to a rehabilitation center where his parents tried hard to cure him by giving him many expensive elixirs and hiring the best magical doctors to take care of him. As time went on, they managed to somehow fix his IQ to a degree that he was no longer an idiot. But sadly, they failed miserably in making him gain back his powers to use magic. So, naturally, by the time of his second assessment, he failed again. He was declared a null, someone who had no magic. His punishment had become final and he was banished from the family, with one last chance to return for the final assessment at 18, where if he were to fail again, his banishment would become permanent. No longer able to help him using the family resources, his parents secretly found him a foster home in Lumar City where his father worked as the magical tower master. This was the safest place for him, as the city also was under the full jurisdiction of his family. Although they might have broken some family rules by helping him, no one could really persecute them for spending some of their pocket money here and there to help the poor boy settle in. They couldn't really throw him in some orphanage after all with his IQ. He would definitely die there. More than that, after paying some bribes under the guise of generous donations, they also went the extra step to enroll him in one of the few magical schools for the nulls. Such schools were constructed to hunt for gifted individuals among the public to try to study magic. Although many people couldn't use magic directly, they could do it by using magical artifacts and such, allowing them to work as magical engineers. Such individuals were recently in high demand as the cost of hiring magicians was impossibly high for most companies, and some of the best researchers in the world of magic were nulls after all. This school was one of the few pathways a normal person could take to pursue higher magical study in the magical university where deep subjects about the nature of magic were taught. Adrian's parents hoped that by the time of his third assessment, he would manage to enter the magical university. This would at the very least allow his grandfather to keep him in the family in some sort. Naturally, his parents' hopes were quickly shattered again by Adrian's incompetence. He, who was now in his final year at school, was at the bottom of his class after butchering through all his exams with barely passable grades that he only managed to score after cheating. He had no hope of entering the magical university, and his future looked grimmer than grim. At the moment, his final assessment was scheduled to be held 1 week later. There his future would be decided. Finishing with his recollection, Adrian sighed as his chaotic thoughts settled. Although not perfectly, he could now control his body to some degree, so he quickly began inspecting it to assess the damage. His meridians were brimming with mana, almost reaching the 5th degree, but other than that everything was a complete mess. It was the effect of years of him trying to activate them without a proper mana control. His magical circuits were so damaged and tangled that a full reconstruction was way more feasible than trying to fix them. But this was strange, since his soul was partially fixed by his parents back then when they gave him many elixirs. Why couldn't he use magic? At that question, thousands of thoughts began to flood his mind again, forcing him to stop thinking and hold his head in pain. Shit, his soul fragments were fighting to control his brain to give an answer. Damn it, it was clear that he could only focus on one thing at a time for now until he managed to fully integrate his soul fragments to some degree. It would take some time. Deciding to worry about all this later, he knew that needed to leave this place and find a place to really relax. Slowly, he opened the cabinet's door and crawled out of his hiding place with unsynchronized limb movements like some ghost. Kya, holy shit, a monster, run. A girl and a boy who seemed to be making out in the room noticed as Adrian crawled out of nowhere and both screamed in horror, then quickly ran away without even adjusting their clothes. They were sure they had checked this room and it was empty. Adrian didn't care as he slowly stood up with difficulty and then began flexing his muscles while looking at the dark sky outside through the window. He was back. Checking his body, he sighed. He was covered in a black like tar material that formed a thick smelly layer over his skin. There was all the waste extruded from his body due to the little restructuring he had done. No wonder those guys screamed and ran out. He looked worse than a ghost, and he really needed a good bath.